Here's what we would do if you were going to set up a permanent colony on Mars. This would be a landing on Mars, no takeoff. This is setting up a colony, means that whatever you see here stays on Mars. We have an idea of how guys, Petrov and McKenzie did a study for NASA in 2007, 2008 that described what we would need in order to make a permanent settlement on Mars. And they want to burrow into a hill, and they know where the hill is. We've mapped the planet out pretty well. There are a couple of flaws in their system. Number one, first of all, it's going to be built in stages. You see the first phase of construction here, then you expand the settlement. Some of this is actually into the crater, into the hill itself. Part of this was based on the fact that we were going to be using nuclear power for the settlement. Now, Mars is further from the sun. Solar power is even weaker on Mars. Trouble with nuclear power is that you need shielding. Shielding is heavy. Remember, weight has always been a big problem in sending people into space. It certainly would be in sending them to Mars. We can use water for shielding. So they're assuming that we can find enough water on Mars by digging deep under to get subsurface water, and that will make this colony work. If you don't have subsurface water, you don't have nuclear propulsion or fusion power, this is probably not going to work. But the design was pretty intricate. Systems and subsystems, and there's your work breakdown structure for water on Mars. We have done different designs. We've tested them on Earth. This is one concept. I think a Dutch guy came up with this, where you have a train going on the Martian surface. Literally, these guys are attached like pieces of a truck. Here's another concept by a Swedish fellow. We've done these on Earth. We've actually made them on Earth. We've had people try to live in them, practicing to do it. You see, again, big solar array and a habitat.
Where is that?
This is in Utah. Here's another one that we've done, trying to see how humans would live on the Martian surface. This one's in southern Utah. We built 3 of these things and had people walking with backpacks, simulating what it would be like on Mars. Mars has slightly less gravity, so these guys can carry heavier equipment. We try to match it. We did that in the moon too. But we have a long way to go before we have a permanent settlement on Mars. I doubt we're going to see one certainly not within my lifetime. It'd be a nice thing to see for the future. So what NASA does, they decided to give Ray Bradbury, the famous science fiction writer, he gets a driver's license on Mars. Driver's license number 1. The reason it's kind of funny is because Ray did not like to drive. He hated to drive. About a year before he died, he was going to come with me on a cross-country trip. We're going to go by NASA Houston and then end up on the East Coast. And Ray was all excited about it. But he said, Tom, you're going to drive. I'm not going to drive. But anyway, he's allowed to drive on Mars. And Ray, unfortunately, passed away. We could not have gone to the moon without doing these kind of things. This is the sign, by the way, that shows up. You make a presentation at NASA's Johnson Space Center, they give you this slide. They don't put Schiller on top, by the way. But they send this slide up. In God we trust, but everybody else better bring data. And here's the most crucial slide. I'm going to do my concluding slide. It's not going to Mars or Phobos that makes a difference. To be very frank, I don't give a hoot if we go to Phobos, but I want to develop the technology that allows us to get there. Because what we do with that, so is what we learn by taking the journey, we spread that all over the world. We have spread the technology that Apollo developed everywhere. They're using it in China, they're using it in Arabia, they're using it in Europe. Every hospital in the world uses it. But that's what we do with what we do with Apollo. That's what we do with the journey to Mars. Develop new technology, better systems. It's what we will do to flourish as humanity. That's the renaissance you were talking about before. You know? And like I end, I say, spacefaring is a great way. It's a wonderful alternative to war. Much more productive. Everybody wins. Wow. Thank you, folks. Yes.
So I've been going on to the university campus, University of Washington, but just in general across the country, we know that there's a lot of pessimism, especially in the youth culture, and I want to hear from your perspective how you think the space program in general, but also the Moon-Mars mission that's just been proposed, how do you think that's actually going to impact the coming generations?
When the Russians put Sputnik in orbit, they beat us into low Earth orbit. It galvanized American education. All of a sudden, people were excited about getting into mathematics and engineering and technology. Didn't happen before. And President Kennedy's challenge to put a man on the moon, and then Werner von Braun, by the way, added and bring him back safely to Earth when they were writing Kennedy's speech. As we were writing it together, von Braun said, you know, bring him back too. So Kennedy made that speech at Rice University. It was well received. It galvanized American education. We began developing technology. People got interested in computer science. I think President Trump is hoping that that will happen again with put it this way, we are wasting money, throwing it away on so-called climate issues. Not necessarily environmental issues, but climate issues in particular. And that's what I'm going to be talking about tomorrow at this conference. The title of my talk there is the disconnect between CO2 and sea level rise. And the fact is, there is no connection between CO2 and sea level rise. And when I say no, it's the letter zero. Okay? And I'm going to show graphically why that's true, where it has misled us. When we are spending money that we could be using to develop technology that would put a grid in Africa, that would raise the standard of living for people all over the world instead of throwing it away. And we have been politically misled. But I want to get kids excited in school and saying, hey, once we have people starting to walk on the moon again, I want to be one of those. And then maybe I'll get on the Phobos mission to go to Mars. Or I'll be involved in designing the spacecraft. And some of my friends have designed aspects of the lunar lander and the command module hatches. And they're my friends, and they're intensely proud of what they did. I want to get kids who are intensely proud of working again for things that help humanity, help medical technology, help us live better. That's what the value of going back to the moon, to the Gateway Project, if that's how we do it. We've got this great rocket called SLS, Space Launch Systems. It's bigger than the Saturn V. It's enough to get the Gateway into the moon's orbit. But then people at NASA saying, forget that, you don't need that, save that for Mars. Yeah. Just do low Earth orbit stuff in space tugs. So those decisions haven't been made yet. But the fact is, Bridenstine has been told by President Trump, make those decisions. Get the RFPs out, look at the proposals, see what works, what doesn't, what isn't going to work. So that's the strength of what we're trying to do here. Yes, ma'am.
My question was just more around the potential that you think we have to start collaborating with China. I mean, we're already collaborating with Russia, for instance. But for instance, if we went with this gateway idea, would that be something that would benefit more than just the United States?
I hope so. I hope so. We've already internationalized what we do in the space station. And then we killed our shuttle that gets us there.
Right.
So we're almost forced to cooperate with the Russians. We have essentially been helping fund the Russian space program. And how we've done that? We pay the Russians $80 million for every one of our astronauts that they sent up there. $80 million. That funds jobs in Russia, in their space program. It's $80 million that we're not spending at Houston or Kennedy Space Center. And what's worse, we agreed when we had the shuttle program going strong to take the Europeans up there for $20 million each. So we collect $20 million from the Europeans for every one of their astronauts, and we send the Russians 80. Okay. I happen to think that killing the space shuttle was a terrible, terrible mistake. We used to own low Earth orbit. We don't anymore. We don't have a vehicle that can do it. We are having a couple of SpaceX and other Blue Origin attempts to do so. I think they're going to succeed. They seem to be doing pretty well. We have, I think Boeing is doing a, what they call a dream catcher, which is a smaller version of the shuttle, which can actually fly down and land like the original shuttle did. But we took a huge, giant step backwards when we canceled the space shuttle. And we shouldn't have done it. When Challenger went up, the day before, my kids asked me and said, "Hey, Dad, are you going to get up early to see the launch?" I said, "No, I'm not going to do that." And they said, "Why not?" I said, "Because they're below specs." There was 28 degrees in Florida that night, and the O-rings had a 32 degrees or higher specification, or they weren't certified to take off. The engineers were overruled by politicians. They flew the Challenger below specs, out of engineering specs, and the O-ring got brittle in those cold temperatures, and the vibration busted out. Okay, well, later on we fixed those. The Columbia accident was a little bit different. The Columbia accident, when they took off, they saw that pieces of the outer covering of the external fuel tank had broken off and hit the wings. Now, it's called foam, and it is foam. However, it rained like heck the day before, and that foam became waterlogged. And waterlogged foam becomes ice. And when you're flying at over supersonic speeds and a chunk of ice gets off, bang, and it hits that wing, it does damage. During re-entry, put it this way, what we should have done is alerted the crew, said, get out there and inspect your wings. They didn't do that. Nobody, as far as I know, was held accountable for the decision not to do that. And yet it should have been done. Now, we knew it happened. We've seen the videos of the rocket Columbia going up, and you see the pieces breaking off, and we knew they hit the wing. During re-entry, the first visible sign that something was wrong was that somebody said, "Hey, we lost pressure in the tires on the left side of the spacecraft." The tires were inside the spacecraft, like an airplane. They're in the body, and when we landed, we let them come out. But why would a tire lose pressure? Well, it turns out that the shielding And the front wing was broken. We knew it was damaged. And the heat basically came in and fried the tire. So we didn't tell the crew that they lost tire pressure. 2 minutes later, they began to die. You know, but then it was too late to do anything about it. You're already in re-entry. The shuttle was a very competent vehicle. The Russians tried to emulate it, couldn't do it. I've seen photographs of the 2 Russian shuttles in the process of being built. They didn't have their own engines. I don't think they were ever going to work, and the Russians decided to forget about them. But we had a very competent low Earth orbit system that worked. And we had over 100 shuttle flights. There was a time we were sending one up almost 2 a month to build the International Space Station, fix Hubble, do all kinds of stuff up there. We gave it away. We blew it. I still wear a shuttle pen here. I'm a big fan of the shuttle. But we have to get it back. We have to do something else. Yes, sir.
We've heard about some new Russian nuclear rocket engine technology in the last year or so. Have you heard about that they're using on like a cruise missile type of defense system?
Again, the problem with a nuclear rocket in space is that you have to have shielding. You can do that with a rocket that has no people on it. Once you put people on a rocket, they're going to get fried by radiation. I could see that being used. You send it up in low Earth orbit, put cargo in it like I had in that one slide, and then use that to send something to Mars using a nuclear rocket. But you can't have people in it. We need chemical propulsion to get them up there. And by the way, we can't do it on windmills and solar cells. Right? We have to have a usable again. Yes, sir, in the back.
What happened to the shuttle? Why did the shuttle program get canceled? Was it just a political decision?
Now, you got to speak a little more clearly to me.
Why did the shuttle program get canceled?
Because of the 2 accidents. They had a review panel, and they said, well, we don't want to take the risk of killing any more people. Let's cancel it. Now imagine that happening after the Apollo fire. This is the 3rd year into the space program, all right? President Kennedy then made the decision, find out what went wrong, fix it, and keep going. We did not do that with the shuttle.
Yeah.
We had administrations that just decided it wasn't worth it. So if you want to blame politicians, blame George Bush too for deciding to kill the shuttle, and blame President Obama, who had full control, veto-proof control of House and Senate, and Obama decided to kill the shuttle on the advice that he said given by George Bush. I blame them both equally. I blame Congress. They just, you have to do it right, and it doesn't mean you do it without risk. The expression that was used by some of the NASA people was failure is not an option. It's actually incorrect. Failure is an option, but you need to minimize it. You need the best you can to minimize it. But space is risky. Every launch we have takes a big risk. We had a launch failure in Russia about a year ago, and they had to abort. But fortunately, the astronauts just landed and never got to the ISS. But it's risky. You're taking these risks. We had people who were willing to take them. We had a risk-averse administration with President Bush, and we had Obama, who, in my view, was very happy to ameliorate what I call American exceptionalism. We owned low Earth orbit. Once we killed the shuttle, we had to work with the Russians. I don't know, and this is my own personal opinion, by the way. Do you remember that open mic situation with President Obama and Medvedev?
Yeah.
Okay, and there's Obama telling Medvedev, after the election, I I can do more of the things for you. I believe he was talking about the space program. I think Medvedev was telling Obama, we don't have the money to run our space program anymore, we need your help. And Obama was telling him, after the elections I can do more. And after the elections he did kill the shuttle. Not good. I'd love to see the shuttle come back. But there's other ways to get to space too. Yes, sir.
So you mentioned SpaceX, Blue Origin, because private industry has been involved in space since the beginning, as you also.
But they always were. They always were.
Yeah, right. But to my mind, this new phenomena of these billionaire, largely tech guys, Bezos, Elon Musk, so on and so forth, having these companies. I don't know. I'm not sure what to think about it. There's been some theories that this was a way for private industry to kill off NASA. Others saying this was an end run around NASA, that when NASA wasn't under Obama, when it wasn't getting the funding, and this was the group within NASA trying to at least get something going, or keep.
Well,
anyway, what's your thoughts on those companies in particular, not necessarily private industry involved in NASA, but those companies? What do you?
All right, I'll give you my big complaint. All right. Remember about a year or two ago, Elon Musk sent one of his, I think it's Falcon rockets up with a dummy sitting in a Tesla car. All right. And he sends a rocket off successfully, and he wants to send this thing far enough up so that it might reach Mars. And he did it, all right? So he launches this beautiful rocket with this dummy driving a Tesla car. They even named the dummy, I think they named it Ridley, after the movie The Alien. And okay, so Ridley goes to Mars. I personally am just too mission oriented. I think what you should have done is loaded it up with materials, oxygen, water, and sent it up to the ISS to resupply them. He's got this great rocket. I'm going to put a dummy on there. I think it was a dummy who made that decision. we should have done something to the mission that we have in space. And he could have done it. And by the way, later on he did it. They went and they actually supplied some stuff to the ISS, and everybody applauded and stuff. But that was one rocket launch that was, in my view, totally wasted. And again, NASA, the people I work with, were very mission oriented. We didn't deviate at all. We knew what we wanted to do, and we went ahead and did it. The problem in letting, quote, private industry go on its own is sending dummies into Mars. We don't need to do that. We don't need to do that. And yet, did it get him interested in supporting NASA? Yes. Is he using NASA specifications on his rockets to make sure that they don't vibrate themselves and blow up? Yes. But he could have done better. That's
The difference in your mind is this mission orientation.
It has to be mission.
Yeah.
It's the only way we got to the moon. We'll never get to Mars. It's the only way to get anything done. That's right. Mission orientation. Yes, sir.
Yeah.
I got a question.
Yes.
At the risk of opening up a funny can of worms. The Edward Teller, the scientist around Reagan, he had supposedly attacked the idea of patents, this whole idea of closely guarded technological secrets, said that they're relevant to a certain extent, but then to another extent, if you're not continually advancing and you're just holding on to old patents for monetary gains and defense against rivals, then you're not really a qualified company or nation. And then you had...
It's a very good observation. And by the way, Hollywood has screwed up on that. And Hollywood, by contributing to the re-election campaigns of many politicians got our government to give 99-year copyrights. Copyrights used to be 7 and 14 years. Patents are the same way.
Yeah.
So that in theory, I can't do anything with Mickey until the year 2030 or something like that. It's coming up soon too. And Disney is still trying to extend those things. That's what Teller is referring to. But
Yeah.
NASA, with its open patent philosophy, made sure that was not going to happen. That technology was made available. Now, there are some defense aspects that were covered that they wanted to keep secret, and it had to do with vibration analysis and things like that. But they weren't patentable, they were just kept secret. So when I worked for NASA, I had a top secret clearance. I had a badge that would identify me when I walked into a room, that somebody knew that they could divulge top secret information to me. We were a classified agency. We had people with badges that were good for confidential clearances and things like that. So it was not, we were not a military organization, we were a civilian orientation, but there were military aspects to what we were doing. So those things were kept secret, but they weren't patented, okay? They just were secret and just not made available to the public. But the open patent philosophy that NASA had was very good. Other agencies have done it too. EPA does that now for contracts they let out. And I think it's important for the spread of knowledge. So the point you made is absolutely correct.
Okay, and just also on that, do you think
Speak loud so they can hear you too.
the current program, which is being proposed by Trump with a mix of some of the potentially private companies coming in, is that going to maintain the open patent kind of system?
That hasn't changed.
Okay.
That hasn't changed. NASA still has open patents. I don't think, again, military applications, yes. If we decide to put a laser on the moon that can shoot down satellites, you're not going to get a patent on that. You're not going to know about it. And by the way, on the moon, that is practical. When Reagan proposed it in the Star Wars proposal, it wasn't that practical. Why? Because a laser beam would be attenuated as it went up through space by the atmosphere. The moon, which has no atmosphere, a laser can be very effective at destroying a satellite. Like this laser right here, if I was outside, you could actually see it tracing a path. But that means the atmosphere is beginning to attenuate it. Not realistic, but the Russians didn't know that, by the way. And we achieved a rapprochement with weapons development, even as we knew Star Wars wasn't going to work.